So there is a important question: what is the difference between the sphere of space and the sphere of nothingness? I think we have touched on that, and I have explained. In order to understand the question, really, we have to have some idea what the Chinese is talking about. So in Chinese, there is no clear difference between the space and nothingness. So the space is Shi Kung, which means Shi means something vague, something not impossible, mysterious, vague, not clear. And Kung is, of course, translating the original meaning, the shunya, which actually means zero. The shunya means zero. This is very often misunderstood, and it is important to know that the shunya is the invention of Indian mathematicians, which has had a great influence on the Chinese, on the Indian philosophy. Chinese philosophy has always been speaking about Kung, but the Kung in China, in Taoism, has a more kind of a material aspect. It is when Taoism speaks about the Kung, it means also, it means Wu Wei, it means non-acting. But the idea of zero is not clear at all. In India, shunya, even now in Hindi or other Indian languages, shunya means zero. Like in telephone, when you say 305, you say sun, you say 3 shunya, and so on. So zero is base in a way for all calculation. This is very important to understand Madhyamika. According to Madhyamika, when zero makes sense, all calculations make sense. When the zero does not make sense, nothing in our experience can make sense. This is very important. So this is also the difference between the approach to emptiness in the Theravada and in the Shravaka scriptures and the Mahayana scriptures. In the Shravaka scriptures, the emptiness is very important, but it is not usually referred to as the ultimate reality. It is always emptiness of something, as in Chula, Sunyata, Sutta, and so on. So the ultimate aspect of emptiness, we can derivate it because Visuddhimagga also says that the Pratitya Samutpada is empty, is shunya, but it means a shunya of the doer. There is an act, karma, but there is no karaka. That everything is shunya of, there is a sensation, but there is no one who is sensed. There is a dukkha, but there is no dukkito pugala. So this is the understanding of shunyata in the Shravaka scriptures usually. The shunyata means the absence of the person, but it is not generally presented as the ultimate reality. You can also derivate it as ultimate reality if, as Visuddhimagga says, dependent origination is empty, then of course you can also claim that everything is empty, because everything we experience through the senses is dependent origination. But the emphasis is on Pugala Sunyata, not on Sunyata as ultimate reality. So in the scriptures of Northern Buddhism explaining the bodhisattva path, emphasizing the bodhisattva path as being the ultimate path, especially Kumarajiva and his disciples are very emphatic on that. So the emphasis then shifts from Pugala Sunyata to Dhamma Sunyata. And it is very easy to confuse for those who do not meditate. I have explained for those who meditate how you get into the sphere of nothingness. Because your mind becomes so subtle that when in the sphere of infinite consciousness you contemplate the infinite space, you get a clear concept, and nothingness is here just a concept, and the concept is a concept. It is not a real Dharma. Emphasis of the Shravakayana is that the Vipassana should happen on the real Dharma. The real Dharma is the Dharma which has a Svabhava. Now, the space has a Svabhava. According to Abhidharma, its Svabhava is that it is the delimitation, or it is a boundary of all form. But the boundary of all form is nothing you can really grasp as existent. So it is like in Theravada, it is a rupa, but not a real rupa. In Theravada we have 28 rupas, of which only 18 are real, 10 are not real, and space is among them, and not a real rupa. Now, in the northern tradition, the space is asankhata. In order to understand this passage, we have to see in Abhidharmakosa and also in Yogacara, the space is not a illusionary rupa as in Theravada. It is the non-fabricated, non-created entity. So it is, so to say, it is lifted. If we want to understand Chinese Buddhism, this is very important. It is upgraded to the same level like Nirvana. Nirvana is also not created like the space. So there is a lot of confusion especially in Chinese Buddhism maybe, about the difference between space, which is also upgraded to asankhata, and between the nothingness, like here, the sphere of nothingness, which is a samadhi on the concept, and the real shunyata, which is, according to Mahayana, according to Pragya-paramita teachings, which are the root of Mahayana, according to Mahayana, the shunyata is the only svabhava. There is no other svabhava except the emptiness. Emptiness is the only swabhava. So it leads sometime, and it is very often common from reading the literature, to the confusion that emptiness is something existing. The error here is also to consider this space, infinite space or infinite or nothingness, as something existing. We know from commentaries that the teachers of Buddha have attained these arupa dhyanas and considered them to be a liberation. Because the sphere of nothingness, there is nothing clear to grasp except the concept of nothingness, which is very subtle. And this concept, unless one does vipassana, which is a peculiarity of Buddhism, no other Indian tradition is emphasizing so much vipassana as Buddhism. If one does vipassana, one will not consider it as the ultimate reality. But if one does not do vipassana, one does only shamatha, it is very easy to confuse this nothingness of samadhi and the ultimate reality, which is also something very subtle, practically impossible to grasp clearly. But as Abhidharmakosa explains, and so on, as commentaries explain, the first arupas, 3 arupas especially, they are named according to the skillful means you use. You meditate on the inconvenience of form, then you can get to the space arupa, infinite space. You contemplate on the infinite space not being the ultimate reality, still being endowed with impermanence, with 4 aggregates, which are impermanent. So you get into the sphere of infinite consciousness. In infinite consciousness, you meditate on the infinite space not being there, then you get the concept of not being there, which is the nothingness. But this nothingness, of course, has nothing to do with the nothingness, shunyata, as being the svabhava, own nature of all phenomena, of all dharmas. So Kumarajiva explains in the sphere of space, which is also cannot be grasped. The space is object, but now in this sphere, the mind perceives nothingness as object. This nothingness is concept related to the absence of space in the infinite consciousness. So, in order to get into infinite mind, you have to contemplate the inconvenience of infinite space. In order to get to the sphere of nothingness, you have to contemplate the inconvenience of the consciousness. And in order to get into the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, you have to contemplate the inconvenience of the concept of nothingness. And when you meditate on the concept of nothingness, just as you meditate on the inconvenience of the concept of infinite space, you get to the mind, because it is the mind from which the idea of this inconvenience of the object comes from. So the mind turns on itself. So we have already explained the peculiarity of approach here is, which you don't find so much in Theravada, is that the samadhi is used not only for shamatha. You don't leave shamatha to practice vipassana. You practice vipassana in shamatha, in samadhi. Even so, the experience is the same, but this explanation, because our mind is mostly functions according to the view it has. So also the emphasis on vipassana in the northern Buddhism is on the view. When you study the vipassana, especially in Mahayana scriptures, you will find that it turns all around the samadhi. You don't need necessarily to see all the dharmas which have a swabhava according to the Shravakayana in order to get disillusioned. Without the disillusion, no liberation. In order to get disillusioned from this body and the world it experiences. So you need, first of all, in the Mahayana understanding, you need a correct view, rather than, as you will find in Visuddhimagga, the vipassana is first jnata pariññā, the thorough knowledge of objects of knowledge. Objects of knowledge are those objects which have no self. When you see skandhas, you don't see self. When you see ayatanas, when you see dhatus, you don't see self. And the aim is to realize pugala sunyata. Now, as you see here, in Kumarajiva and in northern tradition has already this tendency. There is in arupas and in the jhanas themselves, you contemplate the correct view. So they are, so to say, closely linked to vipassana. Because the correct view is wisdom. Correct view and correct thinking in the middle path is a wisdom. And the wisdom is the base for all real kushala. We may have kushala, but unless there is wisdom, it is always very weak kushala. All scriptures, Buddhist scriptures, teach the same. The power of kushala depends on the wisdom. So, if the wisdom is sharp, as the text explains, then one sees the impermanence. That means the objects of impermanence, the four aggregates here, because we are in arupa. And you also get disillusioned. We will see when we discuss the Four Noble Truths, according to the northern system, you will find in Abhidharmakosa, in Vibhasha, actually the process of attaining the path happens in 16 moments. Each of the noble truths has 4 moments. First, the Anantarya Marga, cutting off defilements, which is Zen, which is Kshanti, and the wisdom, knowing that these defilements have been cut. First 2 are referring to the sphere of ordinary Kama Dhatu. The other 2 are derived, referring to the Rupa Dhatu and the Arupa Dhatu. So it means the emphasis is on rather on experiencing the paramata of these dharmas. Emphasis is on the correct view. So when one studies the northern Abhidharma, also of the Shravaka tradition, this is very important to understand. In Vipassana, the emphasis is not so much on the direct experience of the Paramartha. The emphasis is on the correct view and correct thinking. That is Vipassana. So this is quite important if we want to understand the difference between the Southern Buddhism and Northern Buddhism. Even so they speak about the same experiences, they use quite different language. So in order to understand this, what Kumarajiva is talking about, this is quite important background. So here we come to very important passage. So they are, for a meditator, there are 3 views. We have to understand these 3 views in order to understand the exposition of the 4 noble truths, to which we will hopefully come very soon. So the text says there are 3 views guiding the meditator to leave the sphere of nothingness. The view of real existence, which exists, as we have seen in the previous sections, which exists, which is dominant in Kama Dhatu and the Rupa Dhatu. And also in the lower, in a way, in the sphere of infinite space and infinite consciousness. But here it is less dominating than in the lower spheres. Then you have the view of non-existence, to which we come through the misunderstanding of the sphere of nothingness. We have explained before that sphere of nothingness is called Akinchana. Akinchana is also the name for Nirvana, because Akinchana in Buddhism is referred to as Raga. So this is the confusion. We have Kinchana because we have the idea of Pugala. When the idea of Pugala is gone, then there is Akinchana. But here the idea of Pugala is not gone. It can only be gone when one realizes the fruit of Vipassana, which is the Shrotapanna. In Shrotapanna, after Shrotapanna, there is no more wrong view. But with this experience of the sphere of nothingness, of akimchana, there is still space for wrong view. And it will happen if one has, as a text says, dull faculties. Then you have the view of neither existence nor non-existence. And this view is predominant in the sphere of nasanya nevasanya. According to the commentaries, only the Buddha himself can experience the skandhas, because without a clear experience of the skandhas, we cannot really practice vipassana, because vipassana is correct differentiation. But in the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, you don't have any clear perception of the four arupa skandhas. So there is, you may have easily, unless you have already realized the Shrotapanna stage, you may have the view of neither existence nor non-existence. So the aim of Buddhism is to ultimately abandon all views and stay in nirvana. This is Abhisamaya. Abhi means toward. Samaya, you go towards the real realization. The real realization is nirvana or suchness or whatever you call it, however, what name you have for ultimate reality. Nirvana and suchness only seemingly different, because nirvana appears as something to be attained, and suchness cannot be correctly represented as something to be attained. Suchness is suchness because it can never be attained. So this is the logical base actually for all Mahayana practices. This is very often misunderstood. The Mahayana practices are all based on these premises. So the Mahayana Nirvana Sutra says that the object of realization for the Shravakas are the Four Noble Truths. We come to the Four Noble Truths, and Kumarajiva presents the Four Noble Truths almost exactly the same as you will find in the Mahavibhasha Shastra. It is a very orthodox Shravaka approach. After that comes the explanation of the supernatural powers, where he uses almost uniquely Mahayana perspective. But for explaining the Four Noble Truths, he uses purely Shravaka perspective. Why? Because the Four Noble Truths are the object of the Shravaka Abhisamaya, and it is based on differentiation. It is based on established, to use the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra language, it is based on the established Four Noble Truths. According to Asanga, according to Nagarjuna, according to the Pragya Paramita, the practice of the bodhisattvas is based on the non-established Four Noble Truths. Because the reality is non-established. As the Mahayana Sutras, like Sandhi Nirmochana, explain, that which establishes anything is a concept. The reality is non-established from the very beginning. And this is the contemplation of the bodhisattva. What we establish by means of the concepts, not by means of the reality as such. This is a justification of putting only one svabhava into the Abhidharma, and that is the emptiness itself. When emptiness makes sense, everything makes sense. When emptiness does not make sense, nothing makes sense. But emptiness can be misunderstood as something existing or as something non-existing. These are the two wrong views. It is neither existing nor non-existing, as the Pragya Paramita clearly explains. So, according to Pragya Paramita, to penetrate the existence of the skandhas, starting with Rupa, is to understand them as one truth, the truth of shunyata. There is no other truth. So you only use Four Noble Truths as a skillful means to penetrate one truth. This is the bodhisattva approach. Now, you will find the principle of one truth also in the Shravaka scriptures. In the Shravaka scriptures, you have ekam hi satyam dvitiyam navidyate. There is only one truth, there is not the second one. And in the Sarvastivada Agamas, you have the Sunyata Paramartha Sutra, which you don't have in Pali. Very important sutra. But it establishes Sunyata as the ultimate reality, but it is only the Pugala Sunyata. So this is the difference. So now comes a question. In the Buddhist teachings, we also have emptiness as nothingness. In this way, this is real. Because the one who questions, probably a bhikshu, who in those days, in the days of Kumarajiva, there was not yet any significant split between the Mahayana and so-called Hinayana. They lived in the same monastery. They may have been discussing together, but respecting deeply each other's view. The teacher of Kumarajiva was also a Sarvastivada Abhidharma teacher, and Kumarajiva respected him very much and never criticized him, but yet he tried to show to him the logic of bodhisattva path makes sense. That's all. Not that it is a lower view or that it is something inferior. That idea was not yet prevalent in the Kumarajiva's time. Anyway, those who received the Pragya Paramita teachings in the Pragya Paramita Sutras, they are the Arahats, because they understand they are open for deeper understanding of emptiness. Emptiness is very clear for them. So once one lives through the emptiness of the Pugala, he is open, or should be open, to the emptiness as the ultimate view. The Kumarajiva is a translator of the Sadharma Pundarika, the Lotus Sutra, which teaches precisely that. Never underestimating the Shravakas, but introducing the ultimate view to that, being a logical conclusion for one who studies deeply the Agamas. Nagarjuna himself, in his Pragya Mula Madhyamika Karikas, he is quoting from the Sutta Nipata, never quoting the any Mahayana sutras. So this is very important to get the feeling of the time in which these treatises were written. So the text then shows that in Buddhism, this view of emptiness as nothingness is in order to break attachment, and therefore it is said that this should not be considered real. The view of nothingness is only skillful means. It does not mean that the nothingness exists. Nothingness is nothingness because it neither exists nor non-exists. So Pragya Paramita sutras never tired of explaining just this principle, that the Rupa is just Shunyata and the Shunyata is just Rupa, and all the phenomena are like that. There is no exception to this rule. So there is only one Swabhava, one self-existent nature, and that is the Shunyata, that is the ultimate reality. And it is self-existent, but there is no real self-existent as such. The whole Mahayana philosophy is based on that. If you take Swabhava as something existent, and this is again a wrong view. If you take it as something non-existent, it is again a wrong view. So it is the same with the Rupa, with Vedana, and with all the phenomena. When you take it as existence, a wrong view. When you take it as non-existence, a wrong view. So it is neither existent nor non-existence. And this is exactly what the Visuddhimagga explains also. So it is this nothingness based on only on concentration is similar in name as real emptiness, as shunyata, as nothingness. In fact, these two are very different. So we come to the bhava agra, to the highest possible sphere of existence. According to Buddhist scriptures, this sphere of existence is so subtle, the more enduring. So it lasts 80,000 kalpas. The nothingness, 60,000 kalpas, the infinite consciousness, 40,000 kalpas, the infinite space, 20,000 kalpas. Very long existence, but it is existence in the skandhas. in the 4 arupa skandhas, or in the 4 arupa skandhas, in the subtle acha rupa, as some believe, whatever, it is the still existence, because existence is something which can be grasped. Non-existence is based on the grasping of existence. So the real reality is neither existence nor non-existence. When one understands it, one understands the real meaning of vipassana. Because vipassana, one experiences cause and effect arising and ceasing in the same moment. And this experience is the window to the highest reality. So there is no strict division between the birth and the death. Because we make this division between the birth and the death, we are based on not on the real reality, but we are based on concepts. This is very important and so often misunderstood. So we have explained that in meditation we have 2 ways. We have the Lokika Magga and Lokutara Magga. Lokika Magga is based on the disillusionment from the gross and appreciation of the fine. Now, we have seen this explanation here from the first dhyana to the highest, the most subtle dhyana, the neither perception nor non-perception. The more subtle object is not there. That's why it is called bhava agra. It is the top of that which you can grasp as existing. Beyond the top, there is only nirvana. There is only suchness. So, to grasp the nirvana, to grasp the suchness, this experience of neither perception nor non-perception is very important. Because it is also based on neither existence nor non-existence, but still in terms of a concept, not of a real experience, because the 4 aggregates are still there, only they are not clear. So this is precisely what the text explains, exactly on the same logical understanding as you will find also in Visuddhimagga and in Vibhanga and so on. So here we are in the highest possible perception that can be still perceived as something existing, but not really existing because it is not clear enough to be defined. So all mind bases connected with perceptions we have explained, as Abhidharmakosa explains. The lower arupas are based on the prayoga, on the preliminary exercises. But here it is rather than based on the preliminary exercises, it is based on the kind of direct understanding of the inconvenience of any perception. So all perceptions are troublesome. All perceptions in the sense of grasping. We will see that the truths of suffering are the 5 aggregates of grasping, upadana skandha. And the realization, as we will see in terms of the 4 Noble Truths, is the understanding of upadana on one hand and the understanding of vishuddhi on the other hand. So 2 aspects. When you understand the inconvenience of upadana, you understand the real, what really leads beyond holding. Because the sensation is based on perception. No perception, no sensation. Of course, no sensation, also no perception. But the perception is the base for sensation. There has to be a sign of the object before the idea of liking and disliking comes in. When there is no sign of the object, which is perception, so the liking and disliking will not appear. When there is liking and disliking, there is already for sure granted a perception of a sign of the object, be it a person or be it a thing, it will be there. Now this sensation has become neutral already in the 4th dhyana. In the arupa also the same sensation like in the 4th dhyana, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. But until here the perception is clear, but here the perception is vague. Only the Buddha himself can distinguish the skandhas in the neva sanya na asanya. Not even Sariputta with all his wisdom can do that. So at least the commentaries explain. So because this so because here you have neither perception nor non-perception, and without perception there nothing is clear, and no perception is ignorance. Also no sensation is also ignorance, unless you are in the sphere of Nirodha Samapatti, where subject and object both become nirvana. When the subject and object are not both nirvana, then without perception we are in ignorance, because the wisdom is based on correct differentiation. So when one understands like this, then one can go into, by contemplating that the previous sphere, which still has perception, is gross and ill. So one gets into the sphere where there is such sublimity that you cannot call it perception or non-perception. And the question comes, does perception exist in this sphere or not? So this only someone who has not experienced can ask. If one has experienced it, one will not ask. So So, of course, there will be doubt. There is neither perception nor non-perception. What does it mean? Is there perception? There is perception, but it is not clear. Just as I have explained, I think last time, here we finish, as when a teacher asks the disciple to bring water, he brings water, then he says, let's go bathing, but he says there is no water. But he brought some water. Yes, there is water, but not enough for bathing. There is a perception, but not enough to call it a real perception, because there is nothing clear to grasp. So the perception becomes extremely subtle, and extremely subtle makes perception more penetrating. But here it comes to the top of subtleness, and the top of subtleness is not sharp. So if you want to go beyond, you have to discover something which cannot be understood in terms of grasping or non-grasping. That means it has to be a clear experience. Without a clear experience is no vipassana. But it has to be something you definitely understand is beyond grasping. And beyond grasping means beyond existence. This is the mystery of existence. We understand, in a way, existence when we understand that which is beyond grasping. So again, the same, the meditator of dull faculties does not realize existence is still there. There is even that what is grasped is extremely subtle. It still is not beyond grasping, because it is a result of conditioning. And all we can grasp is connected to conditioning, to dependent origination. And dependent origination means the aggregates, the inner and outer spheres of perception, the elements. This is the dependent origination. Without understanding them, we have no way to understand dependent origination. So first we have to understand the jnata pariññā, the objects of wisdom, which have no self, no pugala, atma. Then we can understand the all in our experience being a process, and we can be disillusioned from this process, because we understand the process is connected with existence, with grasping. The existence, the meaning of existence is grasping. Grasping, why? Existence means bhava. Bhava means becoming, from the bhu, bhavati. You grasp, you become. Why? Because you have abhisamskara. Abhisamskara means will to become. And this will to become make the things move. So to grasp is to be on the move. This is why the Nagarjuna tries to deny the movement. This is very often misunderstood. The movement absolutely does not make any sense. In a deeper sense, precisely because of the grasping. And the grasping on what? On the self-existence where there is no place for self-existence whatsoever. In a process and self-existence are two absolutely contradictory ways of seeing things, which are impossible to reconcile. Understanding this is understanding Buddhism in depth. So, as opposed to the one of dull faculties, the one of sharp faculties immediately knows that this tendency to grasping cannot be removed in this sphere of perception or non-perception. So it cannot be the object of liberation. Impossible. That is why, according to the commentaries, the Buddha, who has learned this meditation, Neva Sanya Nasanya, left his teacher because he taught this object as being the object of liberation. And when there is becoming, there are conditions, as the text clearly says, for future existence. And the future existence ought to be abundant. We are in the analyzing the Shravaka attitude. Shravaka attitude is the correct view. Bodhisattva understands it as a correct view, but does not act accordingly. The practice of Bodhisattva is to understand the Arahat, but not become an Arahat. This is very difficult. And so often misunderstood. Actually, you cannot be a genuine Bodhisattva, highly realized Bodhisattva, without understanding the mind of the Arahat and yet not becoming an Arahat. This is a challenge of the Pragya Paramita, of the transcendental wisdom. So, in order to understand, now you are at the top of the existence, in order to understand the ill of anything one can grasp, one has to learn the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths comes as the continuation of the insight into the correct view, which is enabled through the practice of the jhanas. In the Theravada scriptures, the practice of the jhanas is preliminary to vipassana. Usually Buddha almost always explains first the jhanas, then the vipassana. But he does not explain in the basic sutras the practice of the jhanas, how to link it directly with the vipassana. How to link it directly with investigating the correct view. So we see the Kumarajiva is doing just that. according to the Abhidharma of the Shravakas, the shamatha is only emphasizing the concentration, the vipassana is emphasizing the wisdom. So they are not taught as being investigating both the correct view. Now we come to the last question before the Four Noble Truths, which we can start next week. And that is, why is the study of the Four Noble Truths not mentioned when the remaining lower mental bases are being abandoned? So, because the perception, as we have, the object is so subtle that perception is not clear, so it is easy to get the insight that there must be something beyond that, and that beyond that is real. And that what is real, he understands if he has some wisdom. He understands what is real. Only a noble person who is a noble person, the one who studies the anashrava marga, anasava marga, the path free from the inflow and outflow of impurities. Only that such a person, he can understand the inconvenience of all that can be grasped, of all bhava. So when one is attaining this sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, then his wisdom into the object which is beyond this most subtle worldly samadhi can easily appear in his mind. So until now the text says the Mara king, the Yama Raja, has not been alarmed because he knows that in the lower spheres he has still a very stable understanding of there being the existence and there being a non-existence. But here the view of neither existence nor non-existence appears. And this is what one also realizes when one is in the Lokutara Marga, in the Anasava Magga, in the path free from inflow and outflow of impurities, which is the middle path. There is no other real middle path than the path based on the object which cannot be grasped. So the Yama, which controls everything inside the existence, that's why he's called the king of the death, is alarmed. Because who is Yama? The death, the five aggregates, the defilements, that is a real Yama. And he sits there and tries to prevent the meditator for going beyond. So by going beyond this sphere, you go beyond the three realms of existence. So the Yama Raja is worried because, like the Nachiketa in the Upanishads, you can ask about the secret of the death. So the secret of the death is the secret of beyond existence and non-existence. So that much for today. So we have come to the highest wisdom one can attain through concentration, through deep concentration. Then we can start talking about the wisdom one gets through penetrating the real nature of our experience, penetrating the Four Noble Truths, which explains the real nature of what is our existence about. So that much for today. And are there any questions, Supriya?
Jutsu has one.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much, Bhante, for the class. So I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to understand if I understood you correctly. So does complete lack of bhava tanha mean no movement of the mind in all circumstances? In other words, in which case could you possibly have no bhava tanha and movement?
The movement will be there, but it is illusion, because the mind is illusion, maya. We have had it. You cannot live without the movement of the
Exactly.
mind. Not even the Buddha can do it. If you live without the movement of the mind, you will never even be able to go out of the door. And you will not be able to eat, and you will not be able to do any worldly activities. But all these should not be objects of grasping, because you have penetrated the real self-nature of all the phenomena. This is Buddhism.
And also, Bhante, you mentioned, if I may continue just quickly, you used the expression that shunyata is self-existent, and that's a confusing phrase, because emptiness is never divorced from the object that it qualifies. So to suggest that emptiness is self-existent makes it sound like emptiness can possibly exist apart from the basis that it qualifies. So
precisely because the self-existence is empty, the only self-existence is emptiness. This is seemingly...
It's a phrasing, it's a difference in phrasing, I think.
Paradox, but it is the only possible concept of self-existence is the emptiness. And when you accept the self-existence as emptiness, then everything becomes empty. Empty of what? Empty of existing nature. And empty of existing nature means just as the Shravaka Sutras explain, the Rupa is empty, the Vedana is empty, like a foam, like inside of a banana tree, like Marichi, like Maya. So there is not much difference in Buddhist view as far as the unreal nature of existence. Unreal does not mean that it does not exist. It means that it cannot exist as something to be grasped. That which grasps is the ignorance. Upadana Khanda. Upadana Khanda is the content of ignorance. So we have Upadana Khanda, therefore we are in the mouth of the Yama Raja, the wheel of samsara. And wheel of samsara begins with a blind man, right? The blind man does not see the real nature of existence. Because he does not see the real nature of existence, he wants to grasp. He wants to grasp, therefore he is never satisfied. So you don't need to understand Buddhism, you don't need any metaphysical concepts. You have to start with the genuine experience of the reality as it is. This is the emphasis of Buddhism. This is what makes Buddhism of interest, especially in our days. Is it true?
Thank you, Bhante. Yes.
Okay, so shall we transfer merit and leave it for today, and next week we start with the Four Noble Truths so that we have some enough time to think about them, and we will then continue after the summer vacations. I hope by then the COVID situation will be much better, and then we can make some concrete plans how to finish this book and how to do some maybe other text of interest. Okay? Eta vata cha amehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe deva anumodantu sabha sampati siddhya. Eta vata cha amehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabha sampati siddhya. Eta vata cha amehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe satta anumodantu sabha sampati siddhya. Aka satta chabumatha deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chiramarakantu loka sasana. Aka satta chabumatha deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chiramarakantu desana. Aka satta chabumatha deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chiramarakantu tumampana. Devo vasatu kalene sasa sampati hotucha pito bhavatu lokocha raja bhavatu dhammiko. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.